Hi friends, good morning. Welcome to UPSC World. This is Dr. Harinath Reddy, Director of the Institute. Today in this particular video, let us try to discuss about National Judicial Standards Accountability Bill versus NJAC, National Judicial Appointments Commission. We all know that in the context of discovering burnt cash in the residence of Justice Ashwant Verma, in a number of articles in the newspapers, including the Hindu, the Indian Express, and other newspapers, including the Supreme Court Observer website, there was a demand to bring back National Judicial Standards Accountability Bill on one hand, and also there is a similar demand to bring back NJAC, National Judicial Appointments Commission. Then what is this National Judicial Standards Accountability Bill and how it differs from National Judicial NJAC, National Judicial Appointments Commission? That's what we look into in this particular video. So let's begin with the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. So in 2010, this bill was introduced in the Parliament, which is called the National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. In the earlier video, I told you that in 1997, the Conference of the Chief Justices has finally adopted the restatement of judicial values in 1997. So, National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill aims at giving a statutory backing to the judicial standards laid down in 1997 in the form of restatement of judicial values. So in other words, if you see that a National Judicial Standards Accountability Bills has the three main objectives. The first one, it will ask all the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court to declare their assets and liabilities. The second one, it will lay down the judicial standards for the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court. The third one, it also provides a mechanism for penalizing the judges with a deviant behavior. These are the three objectives. In addition to this, National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill of 2010, it provides for the establishment of three bodies. The first one is called National Judicial Oversight Committee. So this National Judicial Oversight Committee will take action on errant judges on the basis of the report given by Investigation Committee. If you see the composition of National Judicial Oversight Committee, the National Judicial Oversight Committee will consist of a retired Chief Justice of India as the chairperson, a judge of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice of the High Court, Attorney General, and a nominee of the President. In other words, National Judicial Oversight Committee contains 3 judicial members and 2 non-judicial members. Or in the earlier video I said, one problem with the in-house procedure for investigating the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court is the Chief Justice of India had a very short tenure. So for him to have a proper monitoring and the inquiry, it is not possible because very frequently there is a change of the Chief Justices of India. So this problem can be addressed through establishment of a permanent body which is called National Judicial Oversight Committee. Then we have 2 more bodies, Judicial Scrutiny Panel and then Investigation Committee. So if there is an allegation of corruption against a judge, in the Supreme Court, in every High Court, there is a body which is created called Complaints Scrutiny Panel. So in the Complaints Scrutiny Panel, as per the bill, the Complaints Scrutiny Panel will consist of 1 retired Chief Justice of the High Court and 2 judges of the same High Court. This is at the level of the High Court. Then if you take the Complaints Scrutiny Panel at the level of Supreme Court, it will contain a former Chief Justice of India, 2 sitting judges of the Supreme Court. This is the composition of the Complaints Scrutiny Panel. Then if there is a complaint against any judge of the Supreme Court and High Court, the Complaints Scrutiny Panel will look into the complaints and if necessary, it will refer the matter to the investigation committee to investigate. So as I said, like the National Judicial Oversight Committee, complaint scrutiny panel will also contain sitting judges, and the investigation committee will do the detailed investigation of the erring judges of the Supreme Court and High Court. So this is the structural framework which is laid down in the National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill of 2010. But the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which has looked into this National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill, has given certain suggestions. The first suggestion is it recommended that the National Judicial Oversight Committee has to be a more broad-based one. In other words, the Standing Committee recommends in the National Judicial Oversight Committee there shall be representatives from the executive, legislature, judiciary and even the bar. But as of now, the composition doesn't reflect this recommendation. In the complaints scrutiny panel, I said there are two sitting judges of the High Court or the Supreme Court, and the Standing Committee, Parliamentary Standing Committee has recommended if the sitting judges are there in the complaints scrutiny panel, they have to scrutiny their own colleague when there are charges of corruption. So the Parliamentary Standing Committee said when it comes to the complaints scrutiny panel at the level of High Court, it should contain a former Chief Justice of the High Court and two judges of the High Court who are not from the same High Court. That's one recommendation made. And then the National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill proposes a penalty of rupees 5 lakhs and a punishment of rupees and a punishment of 5 years imprisonment for frivolous complaints. So Parliamentary Standing Committee has recommended that the punishment for frivolous complaints has to be substantially reduced. So if the punishment is 5 years of imprisonment, if the penalty is rupees 5 lakhs, then nobody will come forward to make complaints against the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court. And then, so the complaints which are made on the judges, these details are kept confidential. These details are kept confidential. The Parliamentary Standing Committee also has recommended the inquiry done by the investigation committee shall be done in camera. In camera means away from the public scrutiny. So these are the provisions in the National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill of 2010. This is one side of the story. On the other side, there is a section of experts who say that the system of collegium has miserably failed in improving the quality of the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court. So it is time to bring back the NJAC. What is NJAC? National Judicial Appointments Commission was a body which was created through the 99th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2014. So this 99th Amendment has provided for the establishment of 3 articles, 124A, 124 capital B, 124C. 124A provides for the establishment of NJAC, 124B provides for the composition of NJAC, and 124C empowers the Indian Parliament to make a law on the procedure and practice of NJAC. This entire amendment was struck down in the 4th judge's case, and Justice Chalameshwar has given a dissenting judgment. The reason for striking down the 99th Amendment in total was, in the NJAC, proposed NJAC, if you see the composition, there is Chief Justice of India, 2 senior most judges of the Supreme Court, 1 law minister, 2 members representing the civil society. Which means in the NJAC there are 3 members from the judiciary and 3 members from the non-judiciary. So here the Supreme Court argued that there is no primacy to the judiciary in the NJAC, and primacy to the judiciary in the appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court is itself a basic feature. In my opinion, this is an erroneous judgment, because the Parliament has every right to amend the provisions of the Indian Constitution, and the Supreme Court should allow and recognize the power of the Indian Parliament to amend the Constitution. But this entire amendment was completely struck down as invalid by applying the power of judicial review and by applying the power of the doctrine of basic structure. So the doctrine of basic structure, which was evolved on 24th April 1973, says that the Supreme Court can strike down those amendments which affect the basic features of the Indian Constitution. Under the primacy of judiciary in the appointments of Supreme Court and High Court judges was declared as one of the basic features of the Indian Constitution, and as the proposed 99th Amendment, the enacted 99th Amendment affects the primacy of judiciary, which is a basic feature, the amendment is totally struck down. So in my opinion, the Supreme Court should have allowed this NJAC to work for a while, but that was not done. So even today, there is a strong need to replace the system of collegium with NJAC, which is much more broad-based. There is a proper check and balance in the NJAC because neither the judicial members have a veto nor the non-judicial members have a veto. If you want to appoint a judge of Supreme Court and High Court, out of the 6 members in the NJAC, at least 5 shall agree. And this is a complete check and balance on both judicial and non-judicial members. So this merit in the NJAC was not appreciated by the Supreme Court. On very shallow grounds, the NJAC was struck down. So now there is a discussion going on in the media that we need to bring back NJAC on one hand, and there are a section of experts who argue that we need to bring back NJAC, National Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. So this is the issue which has been in the news, and I have clarified what is NJAC and what is the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. Thank you and all the best.